Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a great summer break. We are kicking off the new season of the Deep Dive right away, looking at something, well, pretty fundamental. It's about how we understand, well, everything, really. You shared this fascinating piece called Leadership in a FANI World, and it argues our whole way of seeing the world has shifted.
That's right. For a long time, the buzzword was VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We all kind of got used to that idea.
Yeah, VUCA felt like the standard model for a while.
But this piece says, look, that's not quite it anymore. We've actually moved into what the author calls a FANI.
FANI. Okay, let's unpack that. FANI.
Right. It stands for fragmented, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible.
Fragmented, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Okay, these aren't just words, are they? The piece suggests they describe our actual reality now.
Exactly. It's talking about structures breaking apart, this sort of constant background hum of instability.
That anxiety piece.
Yeah, the anxiety. And then nonlinear, how small things can suddenly blow up, cause and effect getting weird.
Right, unpredictable.
And finally, incomprehensible. Just this feeling that it's almost impossible to really grasp the whole picture because there's just so much noise, so much data.
So our mission today, I guess, is to really get a handle on this FNI framework, understand what it means, and why the author thinks our usual ways of dealing with things, our traditional approaches, just aren't working anymore.
Let's start with fragmented.
Yeah.
The source talks about structures breaking down, hierarchies blurring, ecosystems overlapping without any obvious logic.
Okay, examples.
Yeah.
Where might you see that fragmentation in, say, daily life or work?
Well, think about information sources. It's not like the old days with just a few main news outlets. Now it's scattered across countless platforms, blogs, social media. It's very fragmented.
Right, no central authority sometimes.
Exactly. Or even in companies, you see more project-based teams, less rigid departmental structures. Things are just more broken up.
Okay, that makes sense. And that seems to lead right into the anxious, this constant instability breeding stress, making it harder to make clear decisions.
Yeah.
Does that ring true for you? That sort of background anxiety being a defining thing right now?
Oh, absolutely. I think the piece captures that well. It's not just individual worry. It feels like a collective state almost, this constant low-level hum of uncertainty. It does impact how people think, how organizations plan, or maybe fail to plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's exhausting, too.
It is, and it affects risk assessment, decision-making, everything, really.
Okay, then we hit nonlinear. This is the part where, like you said, cause and effect go sideways. A tiny spark causes a huge fire. Plans get derailed instantly.
Yeah, the butterfly effect on steroids, maybe. Think about a small disruption in one part of a supply chain suddenly causing massive global shortages.
We've certainly seen that recently.
Or, a single social media post going unexpectedly viral and having huge real-world consequences, good or bad. The inputs and outputs just don't seem proportional anymore.
Right. The old if A then B logic doesn't always hold up.
Not reliably, no.
Which brings us to the last one, incomprehensible. This feeling that with all the conflicting signals and just the sheer volume of information, nobody really understands the full picture.
And the article points out something interesting here. People are often reluctant to admit they don't understand.
Ah, right. Because that feels like weakness.
Perhaps. In traditional leadership models, you're supposed to have the answers. But in a FANI world, pretending you understand when you don't could be, well, even more dangerous.
So if the world is FNI fragmented, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible, the article argues our standard tools, decision matrices, leadership frameworks, data dashboards, they're falling short. Why?
Well, because most of those tools were built for a more predictable, more stable, more linear world. They assume you can neatly map out variables, that data is comprehensive and reliable, that cause and effect is fairly clear.
But FNI undermines all of that.
Exactly. How does a decision matrix work when the variables themselves are constantly shifting and interacting in unpredictable ways? How useful is a dashboard if it's measuring the wrong things or missing the crucial hidden dynamics?
So what's the alternative then? The piece proposes this shift towards a human lens, human intelligence.
Yeah, it's about focusing differently, detecting hidden ambiguities, reading invisible dynamics, things like tensions, loyalties, trust.
The stuff that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet.
Precisely. Sensing the environment more like a scout on the ground, not just relying on reports, and really focusing on the human move, especially in things like hiring. Getting the right people who can navigate this becomes critical.
What stands out to you most about that human approach?
It's the emphasis on intuition, on reading context, on understanding the people involved. When the hard data is confusing or overwhelming, that human judgment, that ability to read the room or sense the underlying currents becomes incredibly valuable.
The article also contrasts navigators with consultants. It says we need reliable compasses in the fog, not people just theorizing about the fog, people with lived experience.
Right, it's valuing that practical wisdom. The navigator is someone who has actually steered through storms, who has developed a feel for the territory through experience, not just by studying maps.
So experience over pure theory in uncertain times.
That seems to be the argument. Consultants might bring frameworks, but navigators bring that hard-won intuition and adaptability.
And it all leads to this final statement in the piece. In an incomprehensible world, the only true power is the power to understand. What does that mean in this FANI context?
I think it means that when you can't control or predict things in the old way, the real advantage comes from genuinely understanding the situation, the deeper dynamics, the human elements. It's not about forcing things, but about seeing clearly enough to navigate effectively. Understanding becomes the new form of control, perhaps.
So this whole FNI framework, it's a compelling way to think about the challenges we're all facing. It suggests we need to shift away from just relying on old tools and maybe cultivate this more human-centered intelligence.
Absolutely. And it makes you think, doesn't it? How might looking through this F&I lens change how you process information, how you make decisions day to day?
Yeah, how you understand the dynamics in your own world at work or just generally. It encourages looking beyond the surface chaos, maybe.
I think so. Seeking that deeper understanding in a world that often feels, well, FNI.
Definitely. So maybe the question for you listening is, where do you see these FNI principles, the fragmentation, anxiety, nonlinearity, incomprehensibility, playing out most strongly in your own life?
Yeah.
And could adopting more of that Humint lens, that navigator's perspective, offer a different way forward?
Something to chew on.
Indeed. Lots to think about as we dive into this new season.